Good morning, everybody. We are heading out to, we're heading out to the farm, but we're doing a quick pit stop at a local nursery to get some more trees. And I know, you're probably thinking, Luke, it is mid-December. Why are you getting more trees? Well, it's because we're a little bit crazy. So like I said, we are going to get some more trees, and I thought I would at least touch on the question because I know that it comes up every single time we plant these trees this late into the season. You always ask, I thought it was too late to plant trees. Here's the funny thing, you guys. It's actually the perfect time to plant trees. When most gardeners plant trees is actually later in the season. It's a bit of a backwards mentality. So what we are trying to do is plant a dormant tree that when it goes into the ground, it's dormant. When it comes out of dormancy, it's already in the ground. What that does is it reduces transplant shock. So many gardeners want to plant a tree during the growing season because they think that the tree is growing and it will be a healthier, better established tree. It's actually wrong. You'll have more transplant shock planting later in the season. Yes, we are later into the year, but we're not later into the season. Very important distinction there. We're later into the year, but we're not later into the season. If the soil is thawed, and we're above freezing, we're 42 degrees today, the ground is thawed, we have plenty of opportunity to plant trees. I don't care if it's December, I don't care if it's late December, heck, I don't care if it's late January. If the ground is thawed and the trees are dormant, get them in the ground. Absolutely get them in the ground. And granted, a lot of people at these nurseries will look at you like you're crazy. We are a little bit crazy, but they'll look at you like you're crazy. But at the end of the day, they only look at you like you're crazy because most, and I would say 95% of gardeners plant trees in like April and May when the trees are starting to come out of dormancy and it's kind of peak gardening season. So we're at the nursery. Let's get these trees. All right, so we're just getting back from the nursery and we got a few more than we bargained for. So once we started getting all the trees we actually wanted, then the owner said there's a few that aren't great for retail, but they'd be fine in a farm setting. Do you want them? I said, sure, won't say no to free because we're a little bit crazy. Nevertheless, we've got quite a few trees here and just kind of getting them out and sorting them by variety. All right, so we are just planting up these trees we just got here. And I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for me to talk about spacing because it's something that I want to see you guys really get right in your gardens. When you're spacing out things in the garden like a tomato, it's not as, I mean, it's important, but it's not as critical as spacing out a tree because the tomato, it's there one season and it's gone the next. You can always move things around if you get it wrong from season to season with your annuals. But with your perennials, it is so critical to get this right because they're going to stay there forever. As long as they're alive, they're going to be there. Now, how we are spacing our fruit trees out is really important. We're spacing them out based on a few criteria. The first thing we're doing is we're spacing them out by growth habit. The growth habit is broken down into 3 different growth habits. You have conventional, you have semi-dwarf, and you have dwarf. Now, the reason why you really need to know what your growth habit is like with your trees is because it makes a big difference as to how tall and wide that tree is going to get. Now, all the trees we're planting here in our farm, with the exception of maybe 2 to 5%, are grafted. That means 95% of our trees are grafted onto a root stock that will decide the overall growth habit of the tree that we're growing. So for instance, on this pear here, this is a red collapse pear, and the root stock is some other type of pear variety. And that, whatever that pear variety is selected for semi-dwarfism. And so because of that, if we want to plant our trees as efficiently and closely as possible, we want to make sure that we don't go any closer than that 7 feet, and maybe even a little bit further than that. We're giving about a foot, so that when this tree is fully mature and the next one is fully mature, they're essentially going to be allowed to grow to their full biological potential as it is allowed by the root stock without actually touching and smashing into each other. That's going to allow for proper airflow, proper sun exposure to ripen up the fruit, pollinators to find the flowers, as well as for airflow to cut down on things like disease and mold and mildews. If you're planting a conventional tree is one that is not grafted. It's going to simply continue to grow and grow and grow until it hits its biological potential. On an apple, that might be something like 20 to 25 feet in diameter. And that means rather than 7 feet, you're going to want something more like 11 or 12 feet between your trees so that they're not crushing into each other when they're fully mature. It also, and this is a huge thing, is it regulates how tall the tree is going to get. Now, obviously, these trees right here as a semi-dwarf, they're going to be capped at right around 10 to 15 feet tall at full maturity, 10 to 15 feet, and then they're done. Now, if you're getting something that's conventional, essentially, you could be growing a tree, a pear or an apple, or even a cherry, could easily get up to 35 feet tall. And that's a really tall tree, which becomes very difficult to harvest the fruit from. And so what you're going to want to do if you're growing a conventional tree is it's still going to get as wide, but you're going to want to keep it pruned. You're going to want to keep chopping off that height at a manageable height so that you don't have to be, reaching up or climbing the tree to harvest your fruit. And so that's how you keep it shorter to the ground, but it's still going to get just as wide. So now that you understand those two trees, then we're going to talk about dwarf, which is typically, you're going to come in contact with dwarf a whole lot more frequently as a home gardener. So when it comes to planting trees that are of a dwarf rootstock, you're going to have a tree that's going to stay relatively small. This is good for a home gardener. It's great for a home gardener because it allows you to plant more in a smaller area. But the downside is that the lifespan is less. And you're going to get typically in a dwarf tree, you're going to typically get about 5 to 8 years less lifespan out of the tree than one that is semi-dwarf or conventional. So there's a couple downsides and a couple positives, but a dwarf tree is going to have a radius on average, because they vary by variety. Peaches are going to be lower to the ground, 5 to 6 feet tall, maybe 7 feet tall at most, but they're going to get real wide, kind of like a stocky tree. Pears are going to stay relatively kind of spear shaped, so they're going to be really narrow, and they might only get about 8 to 10 feet tall, so they might have a radius, right? They might have a radius of like 3 to 4 feet, but a height that gets 8 to 10 feet, right? Whereas a peach might get squatty and real wide, but not as tall. So it just kind of varies based on the variety. But regardless, it is super important because, again, if you add too much space, you're wasteful. If you don't add enough, the trees are smashing into each other. Now, the final thing I was going to mention is what we're doing for spacing as it pertains to our blocks, because our blocks are all following the same spacing, because all of our trees, like I said, with the exception of about 5% or so, all of our trees are semi-dwarf. And that means all of them will follow pretty much the same growth habit, maxing out at right around 10 to 15 feet tall, getting about 7 to 8 feet wide. So when it comes to how we're orienting these trees on the farm, we're doing two things. The first thing is we are planning for a mow path or a row, and then our rows have our trees. Now within the row, our trees are spaced out according to how wide they should get, with about a 1 foot buffer in between. So we're expecting these trees to get about 7 feet in radius or 14 to 15 feet in diameter, and they're spaced out 15 feet on center. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to have essentially 7 feet on this side for growth room, 7 feet on the other side, giving us that about 1 foot of buffer room in between the trees for good airflow, good sun exposure, pollination, disease resistance, and everything like that. So that is how we're spacing them within the rows. Then the rows themselves are spaced out 20 feet. Why is that? Well, that's because they're not just going to grow out like this, they're also going to grow out like this, 7 feet. 7 feet in either direction. Well, when we have our rows, we need to be able to manage the trees as well as get tractors and trailers in here to do harvesting and everything like that. And so we don't want the trees at full maturity to be closing in on ourselves here, otherwise we can't manage the rows. So we spaced them out 20 feet in between rows. So the rows are spaced 20 feet apart to give us a 5 foot roughly 5 to 6 foot buffer zone where we can mow, we can walk, we can bring a trailer in, and there's no problems there with hitting the trees. It's going to be, it's going to be close, it's going to be tight, but it's not going to be too tight. It's not going to be overgrown. And so that's why we went with 20 feet. Could we have gone with more? Absolutely. We could have gone with 22 or 24, but we went with kind of the bare minimum, right? We went to the closest we could possibly be without being too close. And that's going to give us a ton of plants in a smaller area, giving us a very, very efficient planting. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. Hopefully you all enjoyed. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. I'm gonna get back to planting. All right, see you guys later. See ya, bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I wanna thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care.